Security kicked him out. The man in the pressed uniform, towering with authority and laced with impatience, marched up to him with a look that had been rehearsed 1,000 times. "You can't be here," he said, his voice sharp, echoing off the polished marble floors of the bustling shopping center. People glanced, some with curiosity, others with indifference, their footsteps quickening, eyes averting, anything to avoid the unfolding scene. The black man stood quietly, his hands clasped in front of him, dressed in worn but clean clothes, a baseball cap shadowing his eyes. He had been standing near the entrance for no more than 10 minutes, occasionally glancing at his watch, eyes scanning the crowd with a hint of expectancy. "Sir, I'm waiting for—" "Doesn't matter." The guard cut him off, stepping closer, his hand hovering over the radio clipped to his belt. "Loitering isn't allowed. If you don't move along, I'll have to call the police." The man sighed, his shoulders slumping, but there was no anger in his eyes, just a tired resignation. He glanced once more at the entrance, then at the guard, nodding slightly. "I understand," he murmured, turning to leave. As he walked away, a young boy came barreling out of the crowd, his tiny legs pumping with all the urgency his 7-year-old frame could muster. "Mr. Jenkins," he shouted, voice high and clear. The guard turned, surprise flickering across his features. The boy threw himself into the black man's arms with the kind of unbridled joy that only children possess. "Hey there, kiddo," Mr. Jenkins said, his voice softening as he knelt to the boy's height, ruffling his hair gently. "How was the doctor's appointment?" "Good. Mommy says I'm getting stronger. Are we going to the park now?" The boy's eyes were bright, filled with hope and trust, his small hands gripping Mr. Jenkins' weathered ones. The guard stared, confusion rippling across his expression. "Wait, you know this man?" he asked, his tone noticeably less stern. The boy turned, his face scrunching up with innocent defiance. "Of course I know him. He's my helper. Mommy says he's my guardian angel." The crowd, which had been only half interested before, now paused in full. Heads turned, whispers spreading like wildfire. The guard's face drained of color, his posture stiffening as realization dawned. "Your helper," he repeated, eyes flicking back to Mr. Jenkins, who remained kneeling beside the boy, his hand protectively on the child's shoulder. A woman emerged from the crowd, her heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor. She was polished, poised, the sort of woman who seemed to command attention with every step. Her eyes were focused on the scene unfolding before her. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her voice laced with authority. The guard straightened, clearing his throat. I thought he was loitering. I didn't realize. Didn't realize he was my son's helper," she finished for him, her eyes narrowing. "The man who's been helping with his therapy sessions for the past year? The man who walks with him through the park every Thursday after his doctor's appointments?" The guard stammered, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "No, you didn't," she replied coolly. Her eyes turned to Mr. Jenkins, softening. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Are you all right?" Mr. Jenkins smiled gently, nodding. "I'm fine, thank you. The little man here makes it all worth it." He patted the boy's shoulder, and the child grinned back up at him, oblivious to the tension lingering in the air. The woman's eyes hardened as she turned back to the guard. "I expect you to know who is part of my son's care team from now on. I also expect an apology." The guard's cheeks flushed red as he looked back at Mr. Jenkins, his voice cracking slightly. I'm sorry, sir. I was wrong." Mr. Jenkins looked at him for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them before he nodded. "Apology accepted." As the woman led her son and Mr. Jenkins toward the exit, the boy chattering happily about his plans for the park, the guard remained frozen, the weight of his assumptions settling like stones in his gut. He watched them walk away, the little boy's hand gripping Mr. Jenkins tightly, the man's stride strong and steady, his presence a beacon of quiet dignity. But the story didn't end there. A week later, news broke, a front-page headline splashed across every major outlet: "Philanthropist's son kidnapped, guardian angel missing." The guard stared at the screen, heart pounding as he read the article, the details unraveling in sickening clarity. The boy, the same one he had seen clutching Mr. Jenkins' hand, had vanished without a trace. Security footage showed the boy leaving the clinic, happily running up to Mr. Jenkins, the two walking away as if it were just another Thursday. But there was something wrong, something chilling about the way the man held the child's hand, the purposeful stride, the way he didn't look back. Police were searching. The mother was pleading for answers. And the guard, the same one who had forced Mr. Jenkins out just days before, found himself staring at the grainy footage with disbelief and regret clawing at his conscience. He replayed their encounter in his mind, dissecting every gesture, every word, wondering if there had been something, anything, he should have seen. The news anchor's voice droned on, describing Mr. Jenkins not as a helper, but as a man with a fabricated identity, someone who had seamlessly integrated himself into the child's life under the guise of a caring mentor. A man whose real name wasn't Jenkins. A man with no digital footprint. A ghost. The guard's hands trembled as he shut off the screen, his mind reeling. He remembered the boy's smile, the way he had run up to the man without hesitation, the trust gleaming in his young eyes. He thought about the mother, her commanding presence, her absolute faith in this man she had entrusted with her son's life. And as the guard stood there, the reality of what had happened crashing down on him like a tidal wave, he knew one thing with soul-crushing certainty: he had watched it happen. He had watched a lie walk right past him, hand in hand with innocence, and he had done nothing. The search was only beginning. And somewhere out there, a little boy still clutched the hand of the man he believed to be his guardian angel. The news played on loop. The boy was still missing, his mother's tear-streaked face broadcasted across every screen in the city. Pleas for information. Promises of a reward. Desperation wrapped in polished words, but the trail had gone cold. Mr. Jenkins, the so-called guardian angel, had vanished without a trace, leaving nothing behind but disbelief and broken trust. The security guard, Michael, watched the broadcast every day, the guilt festering like an open wound. He replayed that moment over and over, the way Jenkins had stood there, patient, calm, his hands folded like he had all the time in the world. Michael had been ready to throw him out, convinced he was just another vagrant with nowhere to be. He remembered the look in Jenkins' eyes when the boy came running. Relief. Like he'd been waiting for that very moment. Michael couldn't sleep. Every night, shadows crept under his eyelids, flashes of the boy's smile, Jenkins' firm grip on the small hand, the way they disappeared into the crowd like ghosts. Something gnawed at him, a whisper of suspicion he couldn't shake. He needed answers. On the seventh sleepless night, Michael made a decision. He returned to the mall, slipping through the corridors like a man haunted. His badge still worked. They hadn't fired him, but the looks he got from his co-workers said enough. He didn't care. He was here for one reason. He found the spot where Jenkins had stood, right by the entrance, just beyond the fountain where coins shimmered beneath the water. Michael stood there, eyes scanning the ceiling. Security cameras. He knew the angles. Knew where they'd catch him. His footsteps echoed in the empty halls as he made his way to the security office, heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't supposed to be here after hours, but desperation trumped protocol. The room was empty, by some stroke of luck or divine intervention. Michael sat at the console, fingers flying across the keyboard. Footage from that day flooded the screen. He fast-forwarded, his eyes straining, his breath held tight in his lungs. There he was, Jenkins, leaning against the wall, hands clasped, head down. He watched as he approached, the confrontation unfolding in muted silence. Michael flinched at his own gestures, the sharpness in his stance. But then something new caught his eye. Just before he approached Jenkins, a woman had walked by, tall, dressed in black, her heels clicking with a rhythm that seemed too deliberate. She paused for a second, right next to Jenkins. Michael's finger hovered over the pause button, heart hammering. She slipped him something. A small, almost invisible gesture, a piece of paper? No, too small for that. A key. Michael's mouth went dry. He replayed it, slower this time. It was definitely a key, sleek, metallic, the kind you'd use for a storage unit or a safety deposit box. His eyes darted back to Jenkins' face. The man hadn't even looked surprised. He'd pocketed it like it was routine. Like it had all been planned. Suddenly, the door behind him creaked open. Michael spun around, the room flooding with fluorescent light. His supervisor stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "What the hell are you doing in here?" Michael hesitated, the weight of secrecy and fear pinning him to his chair. But then, he exhaled. "I found something," he said, voice shaking. I think Jenkins wasn't working alone." The supervisor's expression faltered, suspicion replaced by reluctant curiosity. "Show me." Michael replayed the footage, his finger tracing the woman's path. She was tall, elegant, her walk unhurried. There were no distinguishing features. She wore dark sunglasses, a wide-brimmed hat, her face tilted away from every camera. But that gesture, the keys slipping into Jenkins' hand, it was undeniable. The supervisor leaned closer, eyes fixed on the screen. "I'll be damned," he muttered, reaching for his radio. "Get me the police. Now." Within minutes, detectives swarmed the building. Michael stood back, heart still hammering as they examined the footage, conversations whispered in hushed, urgent tones. An officer approached him, voice low. "Do you remember anything else about that woman? Anything at all?" Michael shook his head. "No. But she seemed familiar. Like I'd seen her before. Maybe around the mall." The officer's eyes sharpened. "We'll need you to go through some photos. This could be bigger than we thought." Bigger. The word lingered in the air, heavy with implications. Michael watched as they traced the woman's steps, pausing at every camera angle, noting every detail. They pulled footage from the entire week leading up to the incident. She'd been there 3 times. Always near Jenkins. Always watching. 2 days later, a breakthrough came. The key she'd handed him was traced to a storage unit, an unmarked facility on the edge of town. When authorities arrived, the lock clicked open with eerie ease. Inside, they found stacks of documents, fake passports, photographs, and children's belongings. Toys. Clothes. Shoes. Michael watched from the edge of the tape as they pulled box after box out of the unit, his stomach churning with every artifact. It was clear now, Jenkins wasn't a lone wolf. He was part of something larger. Something organized. The news broke that evening, headlines blaring, child trafficking ring exposed, search for missing boy intensifies. Michael's phone buzzed non-stop, friends and family calling to check if it was true. If he'd been the one to find it. He barely answered. His eyes were locked on the screen, watching as detectives scoured the storage unit, pulling files with names, addresses, and photographs of children. But one thing was missing. Jenkins and the boy were still nowhere to be found. The woman in black? Vanished without a trace. Michael rubbed his temples, exhaustion gnawing at his bones, but relief fluttered in his chest. He had done something. He had found something. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. That night, as he left the station, the streetlights flickering in the damp evening fog, Michael's phone buzzed. An unknown number. Hesitating, he answered. A voice crackled through the line, low and familiar. "You should have just walked away," it said, smooth and unhurried. Michael's breath caught. "Who is this?" Silence. Then the click of the call ending. Michael stared at his screen, heart hammering in his chest. He glanced around, the shadows stretching long and lean across the pavement. The air felt colder now, heavier, thick with dread. The cold air wrapped around Michael like a suffocating shroud as he stood there, phone still pressed to his ear, the silence lingering in the aftermath of the call. His fingers trembled as he lowered the device, a rush of adrenaline surging through his veins. His instinct screamed at him that this was only the beginning. The voice, he recognized it, but he couldn't place it. He stared down at the street, the mist swirling, but there was nothing but shadows. He shouldn't have gone home that night, but his body betrayed him. He was exhausted, mentally and physically drained from days of chasing a mystery that felt like it was slipping through his fingers. He barely made it through the front door before he collapsed onto the couch, the weight of the world pressing down on his chest. But sleep didn't come. An hour passed, then 2. His eyes remained wide open, locked on the ceiling, his thoughts racing. What if the voice knew something he didn't? What if Jenkins, no, the real Jenkins, was closer than they thought? What if this was a setup? The idea of someone pulling strings from the shadows gnawed at him, and that voice, it was like a warning. Suddenly, his phone buzzed again. This time, there was no hesitation. Michael grabbed it, his heart pounding as the screen illuminated. It was a text message, just a single line of text. "You're in danger. They're watching. Get out. Now." He froze, staring at the message for what felt like an eternity. His thumb hovered over the screen, his pulse racing. Who was sending this? Was it someone trying to help, or someone making sure he didn't get any closer to the truth? And then, another text. "The boy isn't lost. He's waiting." Michael's heart skipped a beat. Waiting? The boy was alive. He wasn't just a victim in this game. The pieces were falling into place, but they didn't fit. Michael ran his hand through his hair, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of the words. There was only one thing he could do now: he had to find out who was behind this. And he couldn't do it alone. A chill ran down his spine as his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video message. Hesitant, Michael clicked on it. The grainy footage flickered to life, showing a small, dimly lit room. It looked like an old basement, furniture covered in white sheets, dust hanging in the air. A single light bulb swayed overhead. Then, the camera moved. Slowly, painfully so, the lens focusing on a figure sitting at the center of the room. It was the boy. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear, but the strange thing was, he wasn't alone. A shadowy figure stood in the corner, just out of reach of the light. The figure shifted, and the boy's eyes followed, as if awaiting an order. But it wasn't a man. It was someone in a disguise. A mask. The video cut abruptly. Michael's hand dropped to his side, the weight of the revelation crashing down on him like a freight train. This wasn't just a kidnapping ring. This was organized. Coordinated. Someone was orchestrating this like a puppet show, and they were pulling the strings from behind the scenes, controlling everything. And that shadowy figure, the person who had stood so quietly in the corner, wasn't just a kidnapper. It was someone who was watching the boy, training him, preparing him for something more sinister. His phone buzzed again, a final message flashing across the screen. "We're closer than you think. Find the key. Before they do." The key. That damn key. Michael's mind whirled, but he knew one thing for sure: the game was bigger than he had ever imagined. The boy was part of something far more complex. They weren't just playing for ransom, they were playing for something far darker. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Michael froze. He hadn't told anyone where he was. He hadn't even told anyone what he was doing. With the adrenaline surging in his veins, he moved toward the door, his heart racing. The last thing he wanted was for anyone to know he was onto them. But the knock came again, louder this time, demanding. His hand hovered over the doorknob. He could feel the coldness creeping through the walls, the weight of uncertainty settling in his chest. Was this it? Was this the moment he'd been waiting for? Or was this the moment they found him first? With a deep breath, he opened the door, the hinges groaning in protest. And there, standing on the threshold, was a familiar face, the face of a cop he had worked with on the case. But something was wrong. The cop's eyes were empty, hollow, like he had seen too much. The same man who had been combing through the evidence just days before was now standing in front of him, his hand resting casually on his holstered weapon. "Michael," he said, his voice cold, almost too controlled. "We need to talk." Michael's pulse quickened, his instincts screaming at him to run. But his feet were rooted to the floor. Something told him that nothing was what it seemed anymore. "About what?" Michael asked, trying to sound composed, but his voice cracked slightly. "About the boy," the cop said. And then he added, in a tone that sent chills crawling up Michael's spine, "and about the real identity of your guardian angel." And just like that, the world that Michael thought he understood began to unravel before his eyes, leaving him with one horrifying realization: they had always been ahead of him.